We will call to order the fifth meeting of the Interim Joint Committee on Appropriations and Revenue. It's Wednesday, October the 18th at time. We're in Annex Room 149. If you'll please call the roll.
Senator Boswell. Here. Senator Deneen. Here. Senator Douglas.
Present.
Senator Funky Fromeyer.
Present.
Senator Givens. Present. Senator Mays Bledsoe. Senator Neal. Senator Nemus.
Present.
Senator Webb. Representative Banta.
Present.
Representative Bentley.
Present.
Representative Bowling.
Here.
Representative Branscombe.
Present.
Representative Bray.
Present.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Dossett. Representative Flannery.
Here.
Representative Fleming.
Present.
Representative Frazier Gordon. Representative Freeland.
Present.
Representative Fugit.
Here.
Representative Gentry. Representative Hart.
Here.
Representative Johnson.
Here.
Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative McPherson.
Here.
Representative Palumbo.
Here.
Representative Raymond. Representative Reed. Representative Riley.
Here.
Representative Stevenson. Representative Upchurch.
Here.
Co-Chair McDaniel. Chair Petrie.
Here. We have a quorum, duly constituted to conduct business. The chair will entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from the September 20 meeting.
Motion on the minute.
Have a motion from Representative Reed. Have a second from Representative Bowling. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. First issue we have, well, does anyone have any special guests that they want to recognize? Representative Flannery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a constituent here today, Mr. Bradley Cherry with Grayson RECC. I'd like to welcome him to the committee today.
Welcome. Thank you for coming in today. Anyone else? Representative Brown, I can't see over there.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm over here.
Yep.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to recognize members of Kentucky State National Alumni Association. Some of the members are here today.
Very good. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
everybody. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to recognize the head of Kentucky Rural Water, who is a former basketball player of mine, Scott Young, and he's here with a young lady, Savannah Godin, both from Glasgow.
Very good. Welcome. Thank y'all for coming today. Anyone else? Seeing no one else seeking recognition, we have the first item on for today is school funding approaches. We have Jim Flynn and Eric Kennedy. Eric is at the table and Jim is on by Zoom. I know Jim wanted to be here in person, but there was some scheduling issues we simply could not work around, and so he's been so gracious to join us by Zoom today. Just to give an idea real quick, each of these topics we're going to be moving on probably in a 10 to 15 minute segment, if not 20 minutes as an absolute max, but 10 to 15 is a really good set of numbers for today. And what I've asked them to do is come in and talk. We've got budget session coming up. K-12 funding is always a topic. And I asked that the two of you would come in and give us a little bit of an update and perspective as everyone will recall. Eric Kennedy came in, I think, earlier in this interim, if not last interim also, and gave us updates about as funding mechanisms were utilized in the 22 budget, how districts responded to that relative to pay raises or pay scales and those type issues, as well as other things. And I've asked him and Dr. Flynn both to come in and kind of give us an update on what they see having happened so far. And if you will, please introduce yourself for the record.
I'm Eric Kennedy with the Kentucky School Boards Association.
And Mr. Flynn, will you introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, Jim Flynn with the Kentucky Association of School Superintendents.
And if each one of you will raise your right hands, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you very much. Eric, do you want to go first, or y'all can choose?
Certainly. Thank you for asking us to come in and kind of give an update on, as you said, what we've presented on with this committee in the past. I will be pretty brief because I think, unfortunately, we probably don't have some of the information that I think a lot of us would like to have at the moment. But I will speak to this from an update standpoint. I think about 1 year ago, almost exactly, maybe September of last year, I came before the committee and gave an update pretty specifically on local school employee raises. Of course, you all know this committee and the full House and Senate passed a bill, biennial budget bill, that increased several major pieces of K-12 preschool through 12th grade education funding. There was an increase just in base SEEK in general and several other pieces. Several things that went down to the local school board level where they had discretionary authority over spending some of that funding. And so about this time last year, because the issue of local school employee raises was so much being discussed and so much in the news, really KSBA at that time, we wanted to get a sense of what school districts, what local school boards gave raises, who did, who didn't, what that looked like. So we at that point did, KSBA, with a lot of help from CASBO, the School Business Officers Association, we did a survey of districts kind of during middle of last summer at the start of the last school year. We had never done that before. We had never done a survey before specifically on, did you approve a raise for this school year and how much was it? That exact question does not show up, just that question with nothing else, on any other pre-existing data point. There is nowhere at the state level where you can pull up just that one issue and look at it statewide. It would take lots and lots of digging to try to get through it. But because we needed to know that specific question, we just surveyed the districts. That, a year ago, I reported back to you the results of that survey at that time. Unfortunately, we did not do that again this year. Largely because it was a big undertaking. It always sounds simple and straightforward that you'll just send an email with a couple of questions to the districts and get information back. That was actually a pretty heavy lift for us because we needed it to be full response. It couldn't just be a survey and half the folks respond and we see what it says. It needed to be complete. So that was quite a bit of work with just a couple of us, honestly, at the office. If I'd asked the other person who really helped do that if we were going to do it again every year, she would have killed me and then quit, probably. So unfortunately, I wish we had that. I wish that always took place, where just that question was always showing up somewhere every year. We didn't do it again this year, so I will be able to just refresh quickly what it looked like last year and share just anecdotally what we believe the picture looks like this school year. So as I said, about this time last year, we did that. Everyone responded. At that point, 162 out of 171 school districts answered yes, that their local school board had given some form of kind of across-the-board raise to staff locally at that point. That's about 95%. Some of the 9 districts who answered no, most of the ones who didn't at that point had just the prior year. So big picture, the state budget passed, lots of various pieces of education funding increased. About 95% of boards at the start of that July 1, the start of that next school year and fiscal year, gave raises. What was really interesting for us last year that we went over, I probably spoke for an hour last year. I'm not going to do that this time. We really went over in depth last year that what was interesting to us is we said, well, did you give something across the board, no matter what you called it, just raise, COLA, whatever? And was that just a standard percentage? Did you give everybody 2%, everybody 3%? Or was there something else? There was this other category where most of these school districts that gave a raise did something other than just everyone gets 3% across the board. And so as the results started coming back in, that's what really took all of the work for us to kind of dig through and clean up, is because this hugely diverse set of approaches to these local compensation increases happened last year. Some common examples are classified got a different, more or less increase than certified. Sometimes specific job positions and classes got sort of special increases where that was what they were really having a hard time with recruiting. Bus drivers being a prominent one, nutrition staff. Sometimes districts said, well, we just looked regionally through our co-op that I know a lot of you are familiar with. We looked at our entire salary schedule and the salary schedule of the 5 or 6 districts that touch us, and we went almost job by job, even cell by cell, in terms of years of experience, job position, to find where we were not competing with someone next door, and we focused some increase there that might be more than what we gave just in general. And so it actually was hard for us to present that information out. It took a long time to present it to this committee last year because we wanted to have a great color-coded chart of here's the districts of Kentucky, here's 3 or 4 colors of percentages. Almost all of the districts were just shaded in other. And then we had these long explanations of how sort of nuanced that looked locally. So as I said, now coming to this year, we did not repeat that. We might, hate to predict the future, that might be something that people could accomplish maybe biennially every other year, perhaps. But just purely anecdotally, I can tell you as we've tracked it, in speaking to board members in the summer when this usually happens, kind of May and June, and looking at news articles and so forth, we think that it's about the same situation. It looks like a lot, I don't know how many, maybe a majority of districts gave some kind of raises locally this year. Some prominent examples, I know it's public knowledge, so I'll say in Jessamine County, their school board came in sort of on schedule and approved an across-the-board percentage raise. I think it was maybe in late March, maybe early April. They came back later in a special called meeting right as the school year was beginning, and they said, well, we are now having trouble staffing a few positions. They approved an additional across the board with an additional even over and above that for those really high need, hard to find positions. We saw similar things like that in other districts where a board meeting came back together to look at this again and approve other raises. I have heard, again, anecdotally, one finance officer, it wasn't in a newspaper, so I won't name them. A finance officer reached out to me and said, well, she said, I had to really walk my board members back. They wanted to do more. They were about to vote to do more. I believe we could not afford that. And I had to go through all these numbers and projections with them to kind of dial it back. This is the finance officer sort of giving, advice and counsel to the board. Some districts, again, I think maybe Laurel County, perhaps, I think Jessamine also, we have seen some boards this year, as with last year, they didn't just look at increases of what was in the existing salary schedule, they added steps. As you know, a salary schedule in a school district has step increases. That looks different every district. Some have every year, some have 5-year blocks. Some boards this year created a new additional step beyond, like they could have stopped at 20 years before, even 25 years, to retain folks that could have retired. They were at the top end. There was nowhere else to go on the salary schedule. They created a new step beyond that to keep folks. That is kind of the big picture that I have of what we think is happening, which of course is limited as anecdotal information always is, but it's basically the same kind of situation. I will leave you before I turn it over to Jim Flynn. I will just say again that KSBA, we think essentially forever, as far back as there's institutional knowledge, we sort of say that that's a preferable way for this issue to be approached, that there is sort of discretionary authority at the local level for the boards to do these sometimes very nuanced job class by job class adjustments in a salary schedule. At the time, as I said, CASBO, that other group of business officers, they helped us do this survey last year. Not to speak for them, which I don't, but the president at the time of CASBO did an interview in our magazine that all of you receive, who said for them and their group, they felt the same way, that that's the best approach to take because there are always local situations and local issues that are hard for folks to know, even regionally, much less statewide. Some things sometimes are counterintuitive. You think something's going to come out one way, and then you run it through a formula and it comes out differently. Some of the concerns that have been voiced from our members, sometimes just directly to us as staff at KSBA, when you ask a lot of school board members questions about compensation and recruitment and retention, one of the most common things that we'll hear back from members is their big issue is a next district within an easy commute. Either the district touching them or an easy commute away pays more. And so there's always the concern of if there's a gap, and our biggest issue is competing against losing people to that next district that pays more. If everyone moves up perfectly, that issue is not addressed at all. And that's sometimes, like I said, that is, if I had to pick the most common thing we hear about this overall topic, it's that of competing with folks next door.
Good.
I'll leave it there if there's any questions or anything.
Very good. Jim Flynn, you still there?
I'm here. Thanks for the opportunity, and I appreciate Eric's remarks, and of course, superintendents share those sentiments. I will tell you first and foremost, superintendents were appreciative of the approach for the 2022 budget policy, and appreciate the investment and the discretion to use those funds to what they needed based on the local context. I talked to superintendents from all over the state, and we just had a superintendent summit a few weeks ago in Lexington and had a large gathering there. But I hear all kinds of challenges they're facing. Eric's already mentioned about competing with neighboring districts, But just to put that in a little bit more contextual view for you, I talked to several superintendents that they're concerned about losing experienced teachers and that they're having to compete with those surrounding districts, and they've got to work on that end of their salary schedules. Others, particularly along the border of Tennessee now, are very concerned with beginning teacher salaries. And but then when I talked to my Northern Kentucky superintendent colleagues, they're talking about we're competing with Amazon for both certified and classified employees up there in that region. And then, of course, Central Kentucky is bracing for the impact of Ford and all the ancillary businesses that will follow, and how that's going to impact their competition for both certified and classified employees. So I will tell you, local context matters a lot, and that maximum discretion at the local level by the superintendent and the local board of education to deploy those resources that you all invest is what's preferred. And so we really appreciated the approach of 2022 and would hope that 2024 biennial budget policy would take the same or a similar approach to allow for that local context. The teacher shortages are real, but so are the bus drivers, SROs, custodians, and the list goes on and on. And so just know that those investments you make in the seat-based, pupil transportation, and other parts of the education space are very much appreciated and needed. And again, we certainly support what you all did last time, and would hope that we have some of that discretion moving forward in the 2024 budget policy.
Very good. Thank you, both of you. And I am trying to move this one along today, so I'll make my own apologies for that, but I'm not seeing anyone that's asking to be recognized for questions. I'm going to say simply thank you to both of you coming up and giving us an update, and then we're going to move to the next topic. SEEK and Student Transportation Funding Formula, and Che Ritter. Now that was an update generally, and now we're going to get into a little more nuts and bolts about SEEK formula and transportation formula. And I've asked Che to give us a refresher on these two topics, not a detail, because if we are past lunch and if we go into the details, I'm going to lose every one of you. But if you can give us a refresher, a high-level refresher, because we're going back into budget cycle. These are always two things that are talked about. And if you will do that, please, whether the presentation is good for you or whether you want to do it extemporaneously based off of that, ever how, that's great. 10, 15. Okay, thank you very much.
I will be so fast, you will say, who was that guy?
Very good. If you will, so that we know who you are,
yes.
Will you introduce yourself for the record, please?
Yes, sir. Che Ritter with the Department of Education, Division of District Support. Over here to talk about our SEEK program and transportation funding for K through 12 schools.
Very good. If you'll raise your right hand, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Please proceed.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks again for having us over here. I'm going to move very fast, as always. If you wake up middle of the night with questions, let us know. We don't sleep. We worry about numbers all day, every day. So 1989, Rose versus Council versus Better Education. SEEK's a big program. It's talked about a lot over here. Of course, the two previous gentlemen in front of me, very well versed in it as well. We pay a lot of attention to it. It's a big ticket budget item. The department again, with LRC staff, budget staff, the governor's budget staff, we all work together to try to build some estimates and to build this big chunk of our budget, very important part of our budget. Because of that lawsuit, the Kentucky Education Reform Act was passed and thus Support Education Excellence in Kentucky, a program that we call SEEK. So the big picture is there's basically three big sources of revenue: federal, state, and local. Obviously with federal, more recently, ESSER funding, which you've probably heard of, has increased that federal funding side. With state, it's sort of broken out into three large categories. SEEK's a huge one, obviously, $2.3 billion. 1.9 and on behalf. These are TRS contributions, health insurance and life insurance the state pays on behalf of districts. That's right at $2 billion now, roughly. And then other state revenues is basically your grants, the state grants, and you'll see this as what they call learning and results services grants, or LARS line items that our budget director will be over here to talk about later, I'm sure. So total in FY22 is a little bit over $10 billion on K through 12 right now. The beginning of it starts pretty small and it sort of snowballs. And the shortest version I can give is just a whole lot of data, and we push that into the sausage maker, which is a lot of calculations. And most of it's going to be demographic driven, student count driven, and there's some facilities money tied up in there as well. And at the end of it, it's broken out by district. So in each of your respective districts, you may have independents, you may have large counties, small counties, you may have a very tiny independent or a large independent. So each of these generates a different level of funding, but the formula treats everybody the same.
Now, really quickly, I want to interject. There are some formulas where you plug in a number and it pops out at the end.
Right.
There are sometimes you plug in numbers, and depending on what each plug-in is, it affects the other ones because of a factoring or a relational process.
Correct.
Is Seek one of those that's a straight line, you punch numbers in, and it just comes out, spits out, or each number as it changes the relationship with every other number and changes your result?
So it's pretty much a straight line. And if you break it out into a lot of pieces, it's a lot easier to understand. And I'll show you a few examples of that. But for example, here's the first one we do, which is this average daily attendance. And you think of this as a student who's there 90% of the time or 97% of the time, that would generate, that 0.97 of an AADA. So that starts adding up all the students in the school district, and there's some adjustments for weather and low attendance days. But we take that number and it develops into this base guarantee amount, and you all will set a per pupil amount in the budget for each and every biennium. Right now it's set at $4,200. So we take that, multiply it by the number of AADA, and we'll sometimes say, well, that's kids. Well, it's technically kids and their attendance. So that is guaranteed base. That's a huge number for these districts. And these are the rest of what we call add-ons. We've got a free lunch add-on, which is about $630 per student. The exceptional child add-ons are a big deal to us too. That's almost $500 million of our SEEK budget right there is exceptional child add-ons. And as you'll see, a severe student would generate almost $10,000. Moderate student, and I can get you the categories of these at a later date, it's about $5,000 or so. We have funding for home hospital students where we don't pay the capital outlay amount, which is facilities related because these students are at home. And this is added on top of that base guarantee. Limited English proficiency students. Quite a few districts have a very sizable limited English population, and this helps support those programs to teach these children, the English skills, et cetera. That's about $16 million. And overall, that's not a huge amount, but some districts have a lot of that population, like Bowling Green and Warren County, for example.
So let me make sure I've got that right in the summary fashion. You've got a base SEEK of about $4,200 per pupil based on attendance is how that's going to get calculated. And then on top of that, we have other factors that get added on to that.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
So all this data is reported to the department from the districts through multiple systems that we have, and we work with districts to clean up data, to audit data, and things like that. Our biggest goal with data is always quality. That's a big deal for districts and a big deal for us. Lots of training. We make sure, and these are a lot of the inputs that go into this formula. And we're not going to go through all these. Property assessments are super important. If you force me to say, well, what are the two biggest? AADA and property assessments by far. Some of your districts have experienced rapid assessment growth. Homes are selling for twice what they were 10 years ago. This impacts school districts, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But ultimately, depending on the district, a lot of these numbers become very important to them, and they too will keep track of them. Transportation. This formula is within that SEEK formula. This is a very complex formula. There's a lot. I think OEA did a study just a couple years ago to kind of walk through the formula and some of the points of it. But again, frequency, distance, type of transportation provided. These are to and from school. You see the buses on the road. That's generating cost for that district. That goes into the formula. Depreciation, when they buy that bus, there's a depreciation part of the formula. If they've added a lot of students, which means you add routes, there's an adjustment for that. And this is a pretty big ticket item as well. And you'll hear this during session quite a bit about fully fund transportation, fully fund. The General Assembly moved that funding up from $214 million to $274 million, which was a huge move up. And now the cost is roughly $400 million. It's about 68.8% funded, which was just a gargantuan jump in funding just a couple years ago. So not too distant past, we've seen that happen, where that funding just escalated up, which is appreciated by every district. Local effort, this gets into property assessment. So if you think of it as property assessments increase, you think of SEEK, there's the local side and the state side. As a district obtains property wealth, we'll do air quotes, your houses go up in value, the land goes up in value, your local PVAs are reassessing it every 4 years. And I'm going to pick on my friends at Beechwood who saw just abnormally crazy growth of 30%, which is mostly a residential area. Their local effort also grows because of that. So that is deducted from the state formula. So as your property wealth increases, you're going to basically slide down into and lose some state funding because of that, because you can generate more local taxes is basically the reason why. And there's a lot of caveats to that, and there's a lot of, I will say, consternation about that, which is all, very suitable, but that's the formula. It treats Jefferson, Pineville, Pike, all of them exactly the same in that regard. Again, very straight, 30 cents per $100 of assessed value. It's reduced out of their SEEK formula. And local taxes, of course, this is a big factor in that first slide that showed all the revenue figures. Districts, obviously you'll get this in a couple of months. You'll get that nice tax bill from your local folks, that real estate, tangible property, and motor vehicles. In addition to that, districts may levy some additional taxes on utilities, occupational, excise, aircraft, and watercraft. And we did find an error, and I didn't want to have your LRC staffer murder me for sending another version of this slide over. So if you notice where it says 1 in excise, that it should be a 0. We will get that corrected, and I apologize for that. But most districts levy utility taxes. It's up to 3%. You'll see this on your bill if you have it. Occupational is a little more rare because it has to be people who work and live in that community. It cannot hit, because it's a school tax, it cannot get people coming in to work, say, in Jefferson County. Excise, like I said, is 0. Aircraft and watercraft is kind of split between, half and half roughly. So you'll also hear a lot of conversations about nickels. These are, they get a little complicated, but the simple version is, of their local taxes, the law requires them to restrict some funding for facilities. And in addition to that, the General Assembly has equalized, it's not a match, it's an equalization formula, based on property wealth. They will equalize some of these nickels. Historically, there have been some nickels for specific reasons, and some were a little more general in nature. And I'm going to just jump to this one. The first one you see there, that FSPK, that's mandatory. Every district has to do it. You'll see growth and second growth. These were back when Oldham County was growing very fast. They've got to build a lot of facilities. A lot of districts are growing fast at the time. So the General Assembly crafted some legislation, put some guardrails, and said, if you hit these criteria, you can levy this nickel, and we'll come in and equalize and help you out with your facilities. I'm going to skip recallable for just a second. Same with equalized facility funding. BRAC was basically Hardin County. Fort Knox was going through the base realignment, and there was a lot of concern that it could bring in lots and lots of new students, which Hardin County would have to kind of soak into their buildings, which it takes time to build, et cetera. So that was specific to that district. In Category 5 back in 2010, these were to knock out some of the worst buildings in our state inventory for school districts. So it may be a high school or elementary school, and I think 10 or 11 districts receive funding through that, and to get those, the worst of the worst, off that list. The recallable is the only current one available to districts. If you talk to superintendents, you'll hear a lot of talk about this one. It can be a little bit of a hurdle to get. It's subject to local petition, which means they can force a vote. And in many cases, that vote will happen and they will fail. It is an uphill battle for districts to get this. Of course, it's well worth it. It's historically been equalized by the General Assembly, and it means a whole lot to their bonding potential to reach their facility goals, maybe build a new elementary, renovate a middle school, or what have you.
Hold on just a second.
Yes.
On that, I know you mentioned it two different ways where the General Assembly matches or equivalates the nickels. Are all of those that you have on the chart required to be matched by the state?
In the budget bill, every 2 years, it is, and the language is in there which equalizes it.
Is there a statute that requires the equalization?
Do not believe there is a statute that requires it.
I believe you are correct. That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
So Tier 1, I think roughly 180 million of our SEEK funding comes in Tier 1. And this was the carrot used years ago to keep districts, or I should say the local boards, to levy taxes in a manner that were, more, I guess, progressive and not lower them to a point where it was harming the district. And so as they hit the sort of targets, if you will, of Tier 1, they would generate some additional money from the state. And most districts, probably 98% of them now, are well beyond that target, and they're all getting as much Tier 1 funding as possible. Again, this is tied to property wealth. So the equalization, again, it's not a match, it's a formula-driven equalization. And this will become a topic sometimes during the budget process. So when we create a budget, when we start from the ground up, we're doing some estimates, usually a year or 2 years out, of populations of students, how many will be free lunch, how many will be exceptional, what property assessments will look like. And these are difficult numbers to predict on the best day. So in some cases, and we hope, we're just right on the nose of our targets, but in some cases we're off. In the last couple of years, we've had a good run where we've had a little money left over. So that's an excess. And generally in the budget bill, you'll see language that directs KDE to say, hey, if you do have excess, here's where we want it to go. That's General Assembly language. It may go to transportation. It can go wherever you all direct it to go in the short version. In cases of shortfall, which is where we've underestimated some counts and there's just no money there to fill that hole, we will have to go back usually to the districts and say we're going to have to do a prorated share of this, and it's called a SEEK shortfall. The department does that, and we basically get it to zero. So if it's 40 million short, we will recover 40 million of SEEK funding. That's difficult for districts because it always comes late in the year, long after they've budgeted and signed contracts and things like that. So we try to avoid that to the best of our ability because it creates a lot of headaches for folks. So looking forward, this was a part of a slide we did a couple weeks ago to talk about trends in our population. If we go to pre-COVID, we had about 609,000 AADA. Again, that's aggregate average daily attendance. And this is what we'll refer to as students, just to keep it simple. So because of COVID, there's a lot of lack of data, and there's sort of this pause, if you will, in collecting some of this attendance data. And as we came out of it, we wanted to see what happened. And as soon as we could get the actual aggregate average daily attendance, which is where people are saying, John Smith is here, Betty Smith is here. We got that data through our districts, and we've declined about 4.6%. So from pre-COVID to post-COVID, you're looking at 609,000 to about 581 or so, which, we know anecdotally is some districts lost students to movement. They move out of state. The state recycles a lot of students. They move from Shelby to Spencer or Spencer to Jefferson. You have students who went to homeschool enrollment. You have students that went to private school enrollment, and this is sort of the ebb and flow of that student population. House Bill 563 from a couple sessions ago was open enrollment, so a student, as long as there's capacity, could choose to go to another district. That happens in some cases, but again, that wouldn't be reflected here because this is an aggregate. If they're in Pineville or Pike, they're going to show up here. So if they went to one or the other, it's sort of irrelevant for our purposes for budgeting. So with the governor's state budget director's office, we've worked closely with them to help develop estimates, and we expect a very, very minimal increase in the FY25 and FY26 AADA. Again, this is one of our primary factors in funding, just barely, not even 0.5% increase. So if you think of it like a U, we feel like we're in the bottom of that U. The question is, when will we start to kind of climb out of that? We do know attendance has improved, but talking to districts, we were here yesterday with 2 DPPs speaking. Attendance is starting to show a little bit more sunshine, which is what we want. We want those rears and seats. It's very important to the process and to educate kids. And really, the last thing I want to mention, as these losses happen, the General Assembly did something pretty, I think, vital. So in statute, there was a law that said if you lose 10% or more of your kids, you can pull some of that funding back through an ADA clawback, if you will. So you're not going to just rip the Band-Aid right off. And that's been helpful for years. But because of this thawing out, if you will, we froze all that data back in 2019. Because of that thawing out, some of these districts said, hey, we've lost tons and tons of kids. So the General Assembly also, after our tornadoes and floods, changed that 10% threshold for 3%. if you were a flood or tornado district. A FEMA district is what we call them. That ended up really injecting quite a bit of cash back into that formula, which will help these districts bridge, pre-COVID, post-COVID, because otherwise it would be a significant fiscal cliff, which no one wants to deal with. And we would rather it be a gradual drop down as they can, adjust their staffing, et cetera. So we thank you for that on behalf of districts. That will make a huge impact to them.
Very good. Thank you very much. Representative Fleming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ritter, thank you very much for
Yes,
the
sir.
refresher course. I think it's been very beneficial. My question pertains to transportation.
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson County Public School System is looking at paying parents to transport their kids. One, have you had any conversations with them? And two, how will this affect the formula, either statewide and or within Jefferson County?
So currently in that formula, the bulk of that cost comes through a code that they would use at the district to basically mark and say, this is our transportation expenditures. And we will have to look a little deeper to see if parents transporting in that cost would qualify for that cost. That gets into some accounting of that cost. I'm just quite frankly not sure if it would qualify. We'd have to look a little closer.
They have not contacted you?
I have not been contacted about that question
Thank
yet.
you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no other, do I have a senator? You got to go right ahead.
You had a lot of statistics here, and then they're very helpful. Just one question. You may not have to answer this question, but how many? I'm sorry. Do you have any figures on how many school districts across the state did increase their property taxes in the last year?
Yes, we had some for all districts last year. We just sent 140 school districts out of 171 to our board last week, I think, for their approval. We'll get that to you all. I don't have it handy, but I'll send that over here today.
If you will get that into the committee, and they'll make sure they get it out.
Yes.
To everybody.
And would you also include the number that increased it over the 4%
Yes.
that's allowable, that's not subject to a recall petition?
Yes, got it.
Very good. Thank you very much. Seeing no one else seeking recognition for comment or question, Mr. Ritter, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You boiled that down extraordinarily well. Thank you. Next up, we have House Bill 499 from the 22 regular session, implementation and social worker employment status. Two separate issues, two separate people, one large cabinet. Three separate people, I see now. And if each of you will introduce yourselves for the record, please. Make sure your microphones have a really bright green light on them. Make sure they're sufficiently close to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Laura Began, Department for Community-Based Services.
Andrea Day, the Director for the Division of Child Care.
Good afternoon. Lisa Dennis, Commissioner for the Department for Community-Based Services.
Very good. If each of you raise your right hands, please. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Please proceed, and we're going to do just as I said, okay? Please proceed, but I'm going to frame the issues real quick so we can move along efficiently. House Bill 499 in the 22 regular session was a project to assist with child care across Kentucky. Representative Heverin was the sponsor of that bill, and there was, I think, it was either 10 or 15, I forgot all of a sudden.
15.
$15 billion that was attached to that with funding that would happen about a year delay on. So 22 session and then funding would follow the next year. That would also give time for implementation, which is a very detailed bill for the cabinet, I'm just going to say in general. That bill attempted to do this, offer assistance from state government to smaller sized employers who would offer a benefit to their employees for child care assistance. For various reasons, basically doing something like that. And what I'm looking for is what's the status of that program today? How did we get there? I know you have a good detailed presentation, but as I said previously, just trying to get at what's the status, and then really, regardless of what the status is there anything that you've encountered as a difficulty or a suggestion that we might consider to make this better as it continues to roll out? Please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So, as you said, you gave a wonderful summary of what the Employee Child Care Assistance Partnership Program is. It is a partnership between public and private. Of those $15 million that were allocated, 25% were set aside for small businesses, and that is a business that has fewer than 50 employees who are contracted to work more than 35 hours per week, sorry. We also prioritize those employers that are in a child care desert, as well as employers who contribute at least 33% to those costs. If you want, who's eligible? Again, nonprofit, for-profit entities that operate in the state of Kentucky as far as the employers go. The employees must work in Kentucky, and they cannot be eligible for a federal subsidy program, which is the Child Care Assistance Program. Our child care providers, again, they have to be a Kentucky provider, they have to be regulated by our cabinet, and they have to participate in our quality rating and improvement system, which we call All Stars. As you mentioned with some of the milestones, this bill was introduced to the House on February 15th of 2022. We had, the reg became effective almost a year to the day. So we did a lot of work. Laura, if you want to go to the next slide. We reached out to a lot of states. Florida, Michigan, and Wisconsin all had similar programs to this, not on a statewide level. So ours was the first to go statewide, and that's completely state funded. Most of these other programs had philanthropic dollars, or they used their federal relief money to do that. This was really a great investment on the part of the legislature into childcare in Kentucky. When we met with them, it was, tell us the lessons you learned. We don't want to repeat the same mistakes. That way we get further quicker. Work smarter, not harder. So we really took some time to get those lessons learned while we framed this program. We also work very closely with the Kentucky Chamber, Metro United Way as well, and then we did a lot of marketing. Here is an example of the billboards that we had out. We did commercials, both radio and TV. We had flyers. I sat in on a couple of podcasts. There were webinars. And it also has its own tile on the Connect system, so that it is there with all public service, public assistance benefits. It's there too, so that it's easy for folks to find. The meat and the potatoes, what you want to hear. It's been slow going. We have had 181 applications so far. 82 of those have been approved, which seems a little dismal. But what we found, this ineligible employer, we had child care providers applying to participate in this. And we were like, we're currently offering child care income exclusion as part of our federal subsidy program. So we referred them so that we can maximize those state dollars, not use, or the federal dollars, and not use the state dollars for that. That's really where we are. We have 27 employers participating across the state, and the funds, Laura, if you'll go to the next slide, are touching 26 different counties within Kentucky. So this just gives you a visual. As you can see, Western Kentucky, we have a lot of participation out there, which is great. And then we have a small cluster there in Eastern Kentucky as well, which is typically a child care desert. So we are very proud of where we are so far. The challenges, this is still called a pilot program. So folks are a little leery about, do I want to get involved in this if these funds aren't going to be there long term? We also struggle with statewide child care capacity. We have about 160,000 slots for children in regulated child care. 65% of our counties are considered child care deserts. So that's just what our landscape currently looks like. We have tried to encourage and incentivize folks with ARPA dollars to open new programs. We had a business partnership matching grant. We had 5 recipients of that. We had a child care desert matching grant as well. We offered 25 of those across the state, as well as a community partnership grant and an intergenerational care grant. And each of those had 5 as well. Our biggest success has been with family child care startup grants. Those are $5,000. And family child care, it's really an answer for our more rural areas to address the child care need, because it's easier to stand those up. and we have a staffed family child care network providing technical assistance to those folks. As far as next steps, we need to be better. We did meet with the Cabinet for Economic Development, and one of the pain points that they pointed out was benefit equity as well. If an employer offers this for one, what are they going to offer for the others that don't qualify for this? So that's something that we need to think about, do some more research on, work with them. I asked for that meeting because I was like, it's a slow uptake. What can we do better? And so really having those conversations, I think, is what's going to be a driver in this, and really trying to be innovative and creative with how we address this. We are developing an online portal to make this process easier for employers to participate. As you know, technology, it doesn't come quick, unfortunately. So, we're doing this manually this year, but we are on target to have this online in April. And then to continue marketing, to convene a work group with the early adopters of this program to get their feedback about how we can improve this. And then also develop some templates for businesses to think about, like, does this become part of your benefits package, of your menu that you offer? How do you do that? What would that look like? So there's still a lot of work for us to do, but considering we stood this up in a year, I feel good about it. And we didn't know what we didn't know. So it's been a learning process, and, we want to make this successful to support our child cares, especially in our families.
Very good. Thank you. And then Representative Raymond.
Yes, thank you. I voted for this bill, and I think it was a good idea, but perhaps not the best idea in terms of making sure that families can access high-quality childcare, because it doesn't seem to have increased our capacity to increase access for families or to increase quality of care. I think what it's done is address affordability for a handful of families who were already working and who already had childcare. I was troubled over the summer to see billboards in the city of Louisville and to hear ads on the radio that said, and I quote, "Affordable childcare is here," thanks to House Bill 499. And I wonder if more money has been spent marketing a program that's not really working than helping families access care. NPR did a nice piece the other day on success we're having in Kentucky in both expanding access by providing free childcare for childcare workers. So this is an idea that's really working. We could look at expanding that to free childcare for other in-demand professions. We might not need to come up with new ideas when we have proven ideas that are working right now. And we know that the single most important thing we could do for families, for kids, and for providers is direct cash assistance. Thanks.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, and thank you for the rapid fire presentation. I know that's a lot. I heard a phrase in there I didn't quite get. Can you define benefit equity for me again, please?
So what that has been explained to me as meaning is, if I'm an employer and I'm going to offer this benefit to my employees that have children, let's say I have 100 employees, 30 of them have children, what am I going to offer for the other 70 that don't have children, that can't take part in this program, to make the benefits that are being offered equitable to all the employees?
Wouldn't the definition of that be that they don't take part in it because they...
It's part of it from the employer standpoint. If it's part of the overall package and you're offering benefits up to a certain level for some, but not for others, then how do you offset so everybody's got the same opportunity on benefits?
Yeah, I guess I just got to wrestle with that a little bit more down the road. Thanks. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
Very good question. Representative Bentley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did marketing forget to do east of 75?
I don't believe so. It was statewide.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, and somewhat following on Representative Raymond, child care is complex, very complex from all kinds of different angles. This bill was targeted in a particular sector, a particular set of needs. It can't be leveraged for other things. There are other issues to talk about in child care, but thank you for the update on this particular program. Sorry, Representative Bowling, one more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, children that were signed up, I believe it was 113. Is that correct? 82 families, 113 children.
Yes, 113.
Once signed up, did they stay on it, or?
Yes, they are still receiving this benefit.
Okay.
There's only been a handful that have been terminated, and reasons for termination could be that the employee no longer works for that employer. So, but yes, all of them are still being served.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And just a last plug, Cabinet for Economic Development might be interested in this type of program for recruitment expansion, as well as the local economic authorities that are involved with that at the generally county levels or city levels might want to use this on the front end of businesses.
Yes, sir.
Up next, the topic of social worker employment status. And I believe we have Commissioner here on that. And just to frame the issue quickly, we had in last budget cycle some substantial monies put in to assist with hiring, if I recall, about 100 additional social workers in one year and another 100 in the second year. I believe Commissioner or Secretary Friedlander had come in earlier this interim at a budget review subcommittee, I think with Chair Bentley, if I recall correctly, updated. We may have had a small net gain, just looking for status of, okay, where are we? I know that pay was increased. I know there's been a percentage, an increment or 2 increments that would have attached at this point. There were pay increases before, during, and after session. So where are we on increasing our number of social workers so that we can reduce the caseload on each one of them?
Sure. So, and thank you for the opportunity to be here and to share where we're at with our social work recruitment and retention. So we'll go through these slides really quick. So as you can see here on this slide, as of October the 9th, for the department overall, this is all of our employees for all of our different programs, we had 4,678 full-time employees. And this is the highest that our department has ever been staffed, and we are currently approaching our personnel cap. So like I said, in my 26 years with the department, this is the most staff that we've ever had onboarded.
If I may on that one, I want to make sure that I'm clear. DCBS personnel, is that just social workers?
No.
Or is this entire complement of personnel?
This is our entire department, so
All
this
right.
includes everyone. We'll get a little further in details in just a second.
Thank you.
And then here, real quick, on this slide, you see again the state and our 120 counties, and you see how many frontline caseload carrying social workers we have in each of those counties currently as of October. And then just real quick to touch on the challenges for hiring within our social work job classifications. You all have heard us talk about it before. Our social workers are continuously exposed to multiple traumatic events. They they work as a high-risk population similar to emergency medicine and police. They experience toxic stress, burnout, vicarious trauma, and compassion fatigue, secondary post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of that can lead to quality of services being diminished. It leads to our turnover and retention difficulties, and can create trauma triggers that desire staff to leave the work. And then you see here our challenges with regards to turnover. In 2020, our turnover rate for the department overall was right at 13%, and you see that top line, our social work turnover was right at 30% in 2020. 2021, department overall was just over 20%, and then our social workers, that really jumped up to like 40.44%. And then 2022, department overall 14%. Our social workers was right at 34%. So as we have gone into this calendar year, we are seeing in the first 2 quarters a decrease in turnover for all of our DCB staff, including our social workers. And actually through August of 2023, the department's overall turnover was just under 7% at 6.72%. And based upon our calculations, our social work turnover is trending around 11%. So we're very optimistic that we're making sustainable gains within the area of both recruitment and retention. As Andrea says, here's some meat and potatoes. As looking at this chart, you see December of 2022 through September of 2023, and then you see our caseload carrying social workers here listed, both Child Protective Services, CPS, and then APS, Adult Protective Services, and then our totals, and then that third column. So in December of 2022, we had 965 caseload carrying frontline social work positions, and we've increased that to 1,107 as of September. And then, at our lowest point in 2021, I believe we were just under 900 in our caseload carrying social work position. So we've seen slow and steady gain with our hiring and retention of staff. And then overall, again, you can see our staffing within the department overall from January through August.
So just to hit that real quick, I know Secretary Friedlander had said about a net 41 over the 2-year period we were looking at as far as gains in social workers. You're thinking the net gain of social workers during this time period is how much?
So, you can see we were a little slow and the first few months of 2022 and into 2023, but from December of 2022 to where we're at in September, I'm going to make me do math, around 150 gain.
Okay. So really slow in the first year of the biennium, seemed to have picked up speed in the second year.
Correct, yes.
All right, very good. Anything else on that? I don't want to cut you off if you had something else to go.
We could talk about this, but I know we're short on time.
If it's not directly related to those numbers, then
here, just real quick, you mentioned the salary work. We're very appreciative of Governor Beshear as well as the General Assembly and the pieces around salaries. I think that is a part that has led to our increase in one of the factors that has contributed to our increase in staffing. And as you can see, the starting entry level salary for a social worker went from $33,644 in 2021 to where we're currently at $50,754. It's a gain of over $17,000. So again, very appreciative of the work that's happened there. Retention efforts here, we won't touch on these. These are a lot, but there's additional compensation work that went in to help with retention as well around shift and locality premiums, training, flexible work schedules, and different initiatives to reduce caseloads.
Very good. What I wanted to point out, I didn't put this in on the framing on the very end. I think in the first year of the biennium, we put an extra after salary adjustments and increments. I think there was $7.45 million put in FY23 for the purpose of recruitment, and then there was an extra $14.9 million put in FY24 for that recruitment. So we've got some good net gains, at least in the second year. That is good. Anything else?
Just you want to jump to the last slide just to show, or okay. And then there was $1.5 million also. Yes. So in here you can see how those dollars were spent, and if you want to talk about any of that, we're glad to.
Very good. All right, seeing no one seeking recognition for a question or comment, thank you to all three of you. Thank you very much. Sorry.
How many workers are they getting?
Okay, so Representative Bowling, really quickly.
How many workers do you hope to get up to? What would be fully staffed? What is that number?
I don't have that right hand. I know we are, like I said, we're currently approaching our personnel cap, and we are looking at our opportunities to increase that. We are, and with our current, there's currently with our budget, our ABR for an additional 100 social workers is where we're looking at requesting that. So, I think an additional 100 is kind of where we think we need to be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now I have to ask the question: if we were to get to that optimal number, what would that reduce our caseload per social worker handling cases? Do we have an estimate of what that would get down to?
Yeah, that's really complicated.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
that's why I hate to ask, but I have to ask.
Yeah. So if all things were optimal and we did not have a backlog and all of our staff were, because we want to look, so we had no backlog and all of our staff were able to work and carry a caseload, that additional 100 would get us down to around the 18 to 19 mark. That is still on the higher end of where we would like to be, but that would be a much better place than where we had been quite some time.
So to follow up on that, would you mind after this committee getting something back to the committee about what the current caseloads numbers are, and we want actual people doing caseloads and who's available for that, how many have been added in the last 2 years, what the numbers have been pulled down to, and what the, following up on Representative Bowling, what the optimal amount is as you would suggest and what it would take to get there.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you very much. One more. Senator McDaniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On slide 12, you reference a 10% salary adjustment inside of the recruitment appropriation. To whom exactly was that adjustment made, and was that something that we mandated in as part of that recruitment, or is that something that you guys did?
That was for our social work positions, and I think that was part of the budget bill. So yes.
So this didn't necessarily fall in the recruitment appropriation. You just have it here on your slide.
Well, I think it definitely helped with recruiting because the increase in salaries, helped us to bring in additional social workers. So I mean that was part of our ability to attract new social workers. That was the increase of the entry-level salaries.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Senator Boswell, last one.
Thank you, Chairman Petrie. Just a quick question. So I understand the need why we had to raise these entry-level salaries, having trouble recruiting people. But what I want to know just quickly is what happens to the people who have been there 5 years, 10 years? What are we going to do for them? What did we do for them? What are we going to do? Is that going to be a retention problem?
Sure. When we increased the entry-level salaries, all employees were brought up to the new salary. So if they were working below that, if they were earning less than what the new entry level was, then they were brought up to that point.
So you're telling me that somebody that's been there 5 years is making the same as entry level?
That can happen based upon the current regulations that we work under with the Personnel Cabinet. Yes, that can happen.
And if the Personnel Cabinet gets their salary schedule done as we require by statute by November 1, that should address some of the compression issues.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. Up next, the exciting topic of Waste Management Assistance Fund. I believe we may have Sandy Williams coming up to speak about that. And if you will, introduce yourself for the record. Make sure the mic is really, really green and close enough to you.
Thank you, Chairman Petrie, members of the committee. I'm Sandy Williams, the Executive Director with the Kentucky Infrastructure Authority.
Very good. Will you raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So we've got the topic of Waste Management Assistance Fund. And if I recall correctly, maybe in 2022, there was assistance given for operational assistance to distressed water districts, not capital construction, which you normally deal with, but this was set up under, we've just coming out of COVID. We've got some distressed districts because of various reasons, trying to infuse some cash to help that out. And then the funding, was it $10 million?
Yes, sir.
$10 million placed into that. And we're just looking for an update, status update of where we are with the program and any suggestions you may have to streamline it, make it better, or whatever you maybe have on your mind. Please proceed.
Thank you, sir. So, as you did say, the utility has to be considered financially at risk and also has to be a governmental agency that provides public drinking water or wastewater services to ratepayers in Kentucky. So the challenge that we're facing, there's a couple. So how do we define at risk? So we appreciate the flexibility of the language because, as you know, no two utilities are the same and none of the challenges tend to be the same group of challenges for each utility. So the flexibility is critical, and we do appreciate that. Some of the criteria that we are using to define at risk is a median household income less than the state's median household income, a rate affordability index greater than 1, which is a calculation based on an average 4,000 gallon annual utility rate divided by the MHI. The system lacks audits, has a deficit retained earnings, a low, less than 1.1 debt service coverage ratio, excessive accounts payable, excessive accounts receivable, and then non-compliance with a state or federal agency. So those are some of the criteria that we're using to evaluate at risk. Our progress to date. So to really evaluate the progress, we believe that we have to understand the uniqueness of the fund, the necessity of the service provided, and the ultimate goal of improving financial stability. So first and foremost, and everybody understands the critical nature of safe drinking water and adequate wastewater services. People need these services. So we can't just turn them off. We can't not provide the service. The more difficult concept that we wrap our arms around is how do we make loans or provide grants to systems that may never be able to repay those funds. So we look first to provide either very low interest or zero interest loans to these utilities before we look at providing grants. And then capital versus non-capital nature of the fund. So everybody understands a capital construction. It's bricks and mortar, and it has a definable output. So if you add more customers, the utility will receive additional revenue. If you fix an enforcement issue, it will eliminate fines, which will increase the utility's cash flow. If you update system technology, it will lower expenses for the utility, which again will increase the cash flow of that utility for projects. So some systems can't do that on their own. Some systems need help getting to that point before they can even apply for a capital construction project. So this fund, the Water Management Assistance Fund, is critical for providing non-capital expenditures, such as assisting utilities with getting their audits completed. Some utilities are just behind. It could be because they don't have sufficient revenue, or there may not be enough auditors available to get those audits completed. Utilities are faced with staffing issues. The number of available qualified water and sewer plant operators and their staff. So they may not be able to retain or replace staff members that leave. And then they may have a relatively high rate structure and they can't absorb additional rate increases. And they may not even be able to complete regular maintenance. So looking at most loan programs, we want to look for the most financially viable, solid, stable utilities. EPA at the federal and regional level, they require technical, financial, and managerial capacity. These systems may not have that. Our Energy and Environment Cabinet, they look for certified operators. They have water safety standards, wastewater discharge permit limits. They require that project plans and specifications be designed by a professional engineer. Some utilities can't afford to get those services provided. The Public Service Commission, they're looking for fair service and fair rates. The ultimate goal is to protect the public by making sure that drinking water is safe and the wastewater discharge is adequately treated. So that's the ultimate goal of the fund, to assist these financially at-risk utilities. So over the past year, KIA has been coordinating with EPA, EEC, the Kentucky Rural Water Association, and the Rural Communities Assistance Program, or RCAP, the Public Service Commission, local stakeholders, and regional and national technical assistance providers to determine the factors that lead to financial instability, identify a potential top 20 list of systems that could be benefit from the fund, and then we took the criteria to the KIA board for their approval at the October meeting. They had some additional questions that we hope to have answered, and the list of criteria to be approved was tabled and will be brought up at the November board meeting.
Very good. Really quickly, of the funding that was, and I understand there's some complexity to development of the program, okay? It's not something that's existed before as far as I know, not in Kentucky. So at this point, have any of the funds gone out to districts, or are we still in the development rollout stage?
We're in the development rollout stage. We do have half a dozen utilities that we have been working with. We're coordinating with other agencies. We don't want to give funds to a community with no plan to reverse the negative impacts. Sure. So we're working with the utilities, but to date, no funds have been distributed.
Representative Bray, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Can these funds be used to help with the acquisition of some of these smaller districts by another entity?
I believe yes.
Thank you.
All right, and then I think if my glasses are right, we've got somebody from Kentucky Rural Water sitting in the audience. Is that who I see out there? You have anything to add to the conversation?
No, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to coordinate with KIA and Sandy, and there's a lot of work to be done. The need is much bigger than the 10 million. I think Sandy has.
You're not allowed to ask for additional funds, but you can step up to the table. No, I'm just picking with you.
I'm never shy about an opportunity to talk. But where I was going with that is the need is there. I think KIA and Sandy has done a really good job of doing her due diligence to make sure that there's a matrix, a performance matrix, that the monies just aren't arbitrarily given to utility X, Y, and Z. I think that has hindered a little bit of the process, or not hindered. It's just a process to go through. Sure. But we've been able to work very close with her. We talk about the list that we've been discussing. It's a significant list, and I think moving forward, you know, I heard it stated earlier, you don't know what you don't know. But I think we could develop moving forward a performance matrix and establish a better criteria that would make it easier in distributing these funds in a more timely manner, and also evaluate the performance of that utility moving forward, so that the monies are used wisely.
That's a really good point. I would even suggest that on the loans for capital construction, there could be target lists of performance metrics for making sure everyone knows what they need to be doing and best practices in order to avail themselves of state and federal assistance, especially the state side. Representative McCool.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just appreciate what you're doing. Out of the 10 million, and you're still planning stage, but you know, as well as I do, that I got an area that's very concerning. So when is the money, do you anticipate hitting the ground so these people can take advantage of that and take care of some of their issues?
We do have to address the board's concerns. So we do anticipate that the board will
Who's the board?
I'm sorry, our Kentucky Infrastructure Authority board, and we have asked that they approve the criteria that we're using to define at risk, and then each financial assistance package would be brought to that KIA board for their approval.
Timeline?
November is when we
this year.
Yes, sir.
November is the next anticipated board meeting. I think Representative McCool's question may be more pointed of when do you anticipate after that happens that districts would be engaged that are at risk with fund opportunities?
So we've already engaged about a half a dozen districts, and we're working with them through the process. And then when we get the final criteria outlined, we'll be able to distribute funds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Senator Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been talking about this for too long of a time. I know back, 18, all the years ran together, I sponsored the resolution that created the task force in light of the Martin County situation. Then it was reauthorized, Senator Wheeler, and we spent a lot of time for 2 years on that and had a pretty exhaustive presentations that I thought were pretty good and came with some recommendations. It just kind of troubles me to sit here and not see more having been done. And the needs then were extraordinary, folks. Water is one of our most precious commodities, resources, from a safety standpoint, from an economic development and residential quality of life standpoint. I mean, we spent a lot of time on this task force, and we had some really good communications, and it just kind of troubles me to see us sitting here talking about working with 6 districts right now. I'd like to know who those 6 are sometime, if somebody let me know. And, we might need to look at starting our task force back. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Webb. And seeing no one else seeking recognition for a question or comment, thank you very much for the update. Thank you for stepping up cold. Sorry, I didn't. No. Thank y'all very much. Next up, we have provision of utilities to Kentucky State Parks. I believe we may have Chris Perry and Alan Gates and Mr. Arnold, I believe.
Mr. Arnold.
I'm going to just a moment. Yeah. Got everybody? Yep. All right. So first off, if the 3 of you will introduce yourselves for the record, please.
Chris Perry, Kentucky Electric Cooperatives.
Alan Gates, Penny Ryle Electric Cooperative.
Make sure your light is really green on your mic and it's close enough to you that we can pick you up.
Alan Gates, Penny Ryle Electric Cooperative.
There you are. Yep.
Joe Arnold, Kentucky Electric Cooperatives. I'm just pushing the buttons.
Very good. Each of you raise your right hands, even if you're pushing a button. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Very good. Now, let me make clear about this presentation. There are issues with tourism and state parks that we took up last session and even sessions before and every session I've been here. Funding and plans and those type of things. This has nothing to do with that. This is not at their request. It's not in relation to the bonds or money or anything else. What this is this has been an ongoing conversation for years where at multiple state parks across the entire Commonwealth, there are utilities, and in particular we're looking at electric utilities, that the state essentially owns and operates, but it has no real way to operate it, and the equipment is really old. We have no means to really deal with it from a state standpoint, and up to this point, relatively this point, electric cooperatives around the state have chipped in, and they have been assisting extending their services of maintenance and so forth and so on to state parks to help them keep it running some way, somehow. But we may have gotten to a tipping point that we've talked about for a year or two that that's just not a sustainable situation anymore. So upon my request, so it's not coming from anywhere else, this is just following up on conversations that have been perennial for a bit. I've asked them to put together, help us understand that a little bit. Number 2, how would we address it? And number 3, of course, what's it going to cost? So we can put that on deck for consideration into the future. So if you will, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman Peacher. Thank you for all the members of this committee for having us. We are concerned about the infrastructure in the state parks. During all the events of the past few years, we've assisted in getting restoration power there. But we want to show you some of the pictures from some of the state parks. And while we're concerned about safety, reliability, and the infrastructure in the state parks, you can see this is the shaded region of cooperatives all over the state. We serve 117 of the 120 counties in the state and 11 state parks that are primary fed, and I'll explain that in just a second, is on this as well. Go ahead, Joe. This is going to be a video of Carter Caves that you're going to see. We've been out looking at this and to try to give you an illustration of what's going on. You know, you would look at this and say, wow, the beautiful road there, but there's electric in there somewhere. We don't like to have it look like that when we're doing that throughout our systems. From West Kentucky to East Kentucky, we're doing a lot of work on keeping our right-of-ways clearing trees. That is directly related to reliability and safety of our systems. You know, if you remember the ice storms from years ago, when trees get looking like this, they go down. And so we're really concerned about it. We have found, you know, and I must mention, we've got a couple of other CEOs with me that have been working with the state parks, the Energy and Environment Cabinet as well. David Smart from West Kentucky Rural Electric is behind me if you have any questions. Bradley Cherry from Grayson Rural Electric, and Alan Gates here from Penny Ryle. So you can see this is just a right-of-way issue that we're concerned about. That's some of our concerns. Going to the next slide there, Joe. You know, the way these parks are served, the red lines, this is from Penny Ryle's area. The red lines are his infrastructure, the infrastructure of his system. And that red arrow right there is where he serves into the park. It's kind of like your house. The electric serves the meter on your house. You take control of that and you take care of it inside your house. It's exactly what happens here. The state of Kentucky, everything in that blue area there is that electric infrastructure is supposed to be maintained by the state of Kentucky. Now, that happened many years ago. I don't know why the decision was made, but now it's not really been kept in repair. And so, as the chairman said, when there is issues, we will come in and help. But we're worried about the safety of even our linemen. We have qualified linemen who have to look at these poles and this infrastructure, and they're making decisions every day. Can we continue to climb these poles? Can we do this safely? Can we get to it? So I want to show you a few more pictures that will make the point. You know, of course, you can see the right-of-way certainly is in a real bad condition right now. You know, if you go on and see as we move on that these poles are in disrepair. We have seen poles just fall over on days when they shouldn't. Now, as I said, this is an issue that has been coming up for a long time, but now it is getting to the point where something does need to be done. I want to show you a couple examples of what our right-of-way tries to look like. This is West Kentucky Rural Electric down Mayfield, Murray, and that part of the state. You can see how the right-of-way looks from Carter Caves compared to this. But I'm not going to say Carter Caves is the only one that looks like this. Barron River, you know, we can go Greenbow, we can go all across the state, and it looks exactly like this. Now I want to show you some equipment that we've got real concerns about as we continue on with this. You know, this is, you may say, well, that's just electric service going to a building. Well, we have concerns about that. There is really no place for us to disconnect that. If there's a fire in that building, there's nowhere for us to turn it off, or the state parks, or a qualified electrician. You know, there's a lot of work like that does need to be done. That's three-phase service going into one of those buildings that has no meter. You know, this is the one that probably has Alan and everybody else in here the most concerned. As people are walking through the beautiful parks that we have, and they come across this green box, sometimes people like to see if it'll open. Now, that is a live line transformer just sitting in a green box. There's 12,500 volts, maybe 25,000 volts on some parts of our system that is right in somebody's face.
That's normally suspended in the air.
That's normally suspended in there, and there are National Electric Safety Code, that's what we're under, that we have to follow for clearance issues and everything. That was used years ago. We do not use that on our systems anymore. We just think it's dangerous if not taken care of. This is what one on our system looks like. It's closed, locked up with that, and that is insulation on some of that three-phase unit when you open it up like that. And our qualified linemen have to have specific safety equipment to deal with that. You know, once again, that's just transformers that you can see that are deteriorating, aging. There's maybe even bigger problems with those transformers that we have to deal with. So what do we really need to do? And we've been talking to the parks, and we appreciate all the conversation we're having with them. We would like to come in and do some engineering work. We've done some preliminary estimates. I'm going to show you in 1 second. But the right-of-way has to be cleared. Something's your reliability. We found, West Kentucky did this research, the outages in the state parks that they serve are 60 times longer than our averages. Now think about that. They measure them in days. We measure them in minutes, the outages on our systems, which is a real problem. So right-of-way has to be cleared. aged infrastructure that is out there. There needs to be some new construction, new equipment, safety needs to be taken care of. All these things we do every day on our systems. So, just quickly, these are some of the estimated costs that we came up with on a high-level engineering. We need to do a deeper dive into this. But $2.3 million at Jenny Wiley, $450,000 at Nolan State Park, Natural Bridge, about $1 million in that range. Barron River, $2.1 million is what farmers estimated with us. Carter Caves, they have 2 parks. They serve Greenbow and Carter Caves there. $3.7 million, as well as, and then for Greenbow, it's $1.7 million. We get to Lake Barkley. This is where David and Alan serve. Lake Barkley there. Well, we estimate that it's probably one that's in a lot of repair. And one of the reasons it needs a lot is during the pandemic, as well as during the tornadoes, the state was putting people there for emergency housing. But $20 million for that one. Taylorsville, $250,000. Del Hollow, a couple of $1 million. And then Kentucky Dam Village State Park, $6 million there at West Kentucky, and then the other park is Ken Lake, $3.5 million. I believe that's all of them for the grand total. We think there needs to be $43 million. Now, is that the right number, Chairman? It could be higher, could be lower, but we believe that is the amount of work that does need to be done. We're really concerned about it. We're worried about safety. We're worried about the reliability of the parks. We want to be part of the solution. This is economic development. This is beautiful parts of our state that we all serve, and we want to help make this better however we can. That's why we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to at least demonstrate and show some of the concerns that we have.
Very good. So very high level just for a moment. Let's say we do nothing. State parks are still going to be there, and there's still going to be electric infrastructure there. Will y'all be able to continue to help out, assist, maintain service?
It's possible we may not be able to, because our linemen, we talk about safety every day. And if they feel that it is an unsafe condition for them or the people that are serving there, we may have to turn it off, or we may just not be able to go in there and work on it. That's a bad place we don't really want to get to.
I understand
I'm just
that.
explaining it is a challenge.
Are you under any statutory requirement to render service into those areas?
No.
And this type of situation has been going on for how long? I'm not talking about the condition.
Yeah.
It's going to get worse over time, but
I can't find it. I've looked back 50 years and I've talked to people who've been around. I don't know when this structure was set up. Probably goes back to when some of the parks were doing some infrastructure improvements and things. I just don't know. It's as long as we've been serving those parks.
Very good. And if you don't service it, y'all don't service it, who's going to service it?
We'll probably have to find contract crews and things like that. And I believe that that's probably been part of the challenge in the past, trying to get qualified people to do. This work is specific to utility world. It's what we do and those people.
Very good. Senator Funky Promeyer.
Yes, thank you. I do love to spend a lot of times at our state park and state park system, and I don't see all of our state parks recognized here. Are there issues with other state parks in addition to those listed?
And Alan may be able to best to answer that, but go ahead and explain what you do at other parks, Lake Malone, for example.
Yeah, so a lot of the other parks were not set up this way. So in the instance of Penny Ryle State Park, Penny Ryle Electric owns and operates that system, and it seems to work way better than what we deal with in the state-owned parks.
Yeah, so across the state, there is a number of them that when they were established, the utility was asked to run service in there. So we do all the maintenance and all the work that's in those parks today. These are the exception. All these parks highlighted here are primary fed, so we stop at this point, and the state of Kentucky owns that infrastructure inside there.
In one piece that I thought might have been part of your representation of the cost, what would also be the potential benefit for you if you actually did then become our operator of those systems?
Yeah, so as an example, we have a limited amount of resources as far as linemen go, especially during major storms. The outage hours on Lake Barkley State Park, Chris mentioned, we count in days. So the amount of days over a year's time that Lake Barkley is out is around 5 days. If you're on the Penny Ryle Electric system, we count that in minutes. So the average member there would be out about 39 minutes. So just trying to get this in better shape to where we don't have to spend our lineman resources to get this done. Other than that, there isn't a lot of benefit to it. I mean, I really don't understand why it was set up the way it was, because there's not a lot of savings, if any, in the electric side and the bill that you pay.
Yeah, let me just add on one quick point. So we may add additional meters in there, which is a charge, and there's some energy usage there. But now we're taking on the operation and maintenance of those systems. If we own that, that's what would be the difference. It's really minimal difference in cost. Right now, there is no operation and maintenance, so I guess there is a savings, but that is a problem that's coming.
Yes, and I would also like to add, if we can get these parks up into the shape that they need to be with this amount of money, I think that at least Penny Ryle Electric is willing to take this over and relieve the state of being in a business that they probably shouldn't have been in to start with. Beyond that, I just think that it's going to be better for everyone visiting our state park. You can imagine over a 5-year period, Lake Barkley State Park's been out 28 days. That has to be very frustrating for the people that are staying there.
Thank you. Representative McPherson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if you all were to enter into this agreement, what's your time frame you think it would take you to implement this through the parks to get them up to code?
We can do this work. We could do it in 2 years. I mean, some of them are more complicated than others. The engineering work has to be done initially. We have to get material, but we can do it, and we would certainly be open to making sure everybody understands and be very transparent of costs, benefits, and where we're building and what we're doing. So, I think we could do it in a 2-year period.
Okay, we are celebrating our 100th anniversary this year.
That's exactly right.
So, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, Senator Boswell.
Well, you mentioned I think the term you was high-level engineering. Maybe we ought to consider some low-level engineering at $44 million. It seems like, do you know how much of this $44 million is engineering? You keep talking about engineering. What kind of engineering does it take to clear trees? I mean, some of the other things that you have in your packet here, clearly some of the electrical issues needs a master electrician, but I see so many engineering costs in some of these estimates sometimes, and I think that we may over-engineer some things.
I understand that. I don't think our cost would be over-engineering. This is really, I would imagine, a large portion, well, when we talk to our cooperatives here, but of that, a large portion of that, I would imagine 90% of that is for material. Right-of-way clearing is probably one of the biggest. I mean, to be honest with you, cutting trees, if you want to, I've heard you talk about labor a lot here today. We have that challenge of getting people to cut trees. So the dollars per mile to cut trees and the material and everything, it is very expensive. These are not the engineering costs that are driving this in any way.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're not engineering to cut trees.
No, this is not it. No, we don't do that.
Senator Nemus?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me get this straight. You said that your responsibility stops at property line like residential. Well, in residential, you have easements, and it doesn't stop until it hits the meter. And as far as cutting trees down in that, well, many states don't cut trees down now because it's cheaper to fix than to cut the trees down. They have a system of that. And I do know that y'all do come on personal property and cut trees down and trim them, even if the property owner doesn't like it, because it happened to me. And you have an easement there, and you have the right to do that. So why don't you have the right in the parks? We pay the bill.
Well, and Alan can answer, and maybe I just didn't make it clear enough. I apologize. No, we do up to that metering point on your house. We trim trees. We maintain that conductor that's going there. We do maintain that at a home. What I was trying to say is, similarly to a home, it stops at that meter, and then inside your panel, we don't go inside and do work. like changing out light switches for you. That's not what.
So
we
you're
do.
saying the meters at the parks stop at property line, don't go to the parks where they're used, to the facility where they're used at?
They're at a boundary of the parks. So the meter that we serve to is right at that red line. That is the boundary of the park where we have a meter there. We have a metering point.
But the usage is at a building somewhere inside that, right?
That's right, but we meter it at that one place.
I wish you'd meter mine at the property line so you wouldn't cut my trees down.
Yeah, but this was how this is common. Industrial customers, many industrial customers will do something similar to this, where we will have a high voltage meter at a location, and then they take with their electricians and their people, they take it on into their building and do that work. That's what the state chose to do at this time.
So if we could give you the easement into the buildings.
I want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah,
we got another line of questioning?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
We can talk
If
offline.
there is, that's fine. I'm just wanting to make sure.
Yeah.
We're good? All right. Representative Dossett?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alan, I know you and I were having a conversation about this issue back during the summer. And I think it's important, especially when we look at the cost there at Barkley, how many acres that Lake Barkley, the land between the lakes area, how many acres that covers, and also the fact that they're on the park. The issue with the poles, rotting poles, it would be hard pressed, I know, for you to have your linemen actually going up on those poles and trying to do that work. And I see the importance of what we're trying to do right here to get the infrastructure in better shape, not only to improve the time of getting electric back on, utilities back on, but also, and more importantly, the safety of those linemen, which are individuals, myself and Alan, know they're at home because we come from the same community. We were born and raised in the same community, and I know you want to be protective of your employees.
You want to?
The number for Lake Barkley State Park is a larger number, and that's really based on the size of the park. So there's more miles compared to some of the other parks. Another thing that we looked at was doing a lot of underground in the state park, just for the simple fact that if we get into the vegetation management part of this at the state parks, it's not going to look like it does today. Mm-hmm. So we designed a lot of underground into our number. 40%, we have gone through and tested 40% of the poles that are on Lake Barkley State Park are presently rotten. We do not allow our linemen to climb poles in the state park. We do not allow them to open those transclosures, that green box, without de-energizing. It is a huge safety issue, and these are for qualified people. So it's really concerning for me what it is for the public and some of the state park people that are responsible for making sure that this stays on. Just so you all know, there have been some of the state parks, at least one in my tenure at Pennyrile, that got electrocuted on one of those transclosures. So it's a dangerous situation.
Thank you. Senator Webb?
Thank you. Since I have two that looks like we're going to have to go to primitive camping in my neck of the woods, Greenbow and Carter Caves, I've actually driven by and seen problems occur, and we have down days too. And we have a lot of ice storms now. We're in the ice storm belt, and we've just got some problems. But the aesthetics, people don't go to state park to see trees and everything chopped down. It's the antithesis of the experience. So you touched on something that would be important to me, and that's maintaining the integrity and the natural flora and fauna of our state parks. And that, I think we need to be looking at some underground options and aesthetic options, and that the state allows some control over those potential options with some kind of veto power on, based on my personal experience, like Senator Nemes and others, the complaints we get after some of the things, we get those complaints too. So I think you've touched on something there. But let me just say, we used to have the #1 park system in the nation. I think we still do. However, we've starved them for a long time. Since I've been here, my last 25 years, we've woefully underfunded the state parks. That's why one reason we're in a position now. I think with COVID and recognizing the outdoor experience and the economic driver that they are now and how they interface with other signature industries in Kentucky and the like Natural Bridge coming to its own and becoming destinations and we need to realize the value of the resource, and we need to once again fund state parks like we used to, so we can once again reclaim our title as number one in the nation. This can be a component of that in our modernization. That's just pretty much been cosmetic, Wi-Fi and cosmetic the past few years. So, but I'd like to hear more from parks, and I'd like to see more of a us to see the working relationship with you all and the priorities and the needs, and do that before we write a check for something like that. But I think the message I'd have for this committee is we've woefully underfunded our parks for the last quarter of a century. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And what I would say is for the last several decades, at least the last couple of decades that I know of, parks were handled and looked at in a particular way. In the last few years, we've been looking more at utilities and those foundational systems that regardless of how we develop our parks over the years, there are certain things that are going to be there. Unless you're going to go to primitive camping, we're going to need utilities for electricity. And I don't think everybody wants to engage in primitive camping. So this is not to be presented, and I didn't request this, of like, this is the solution, everybody. This is what we need to be doing. That's not the purpose of this. The primary purpose is we got a problem. There's an issue. We're trying to get that detailed issue. These people were so kind to actually look at each facility and give detail about this is what's on the ground and this is what you're really facing, whether it's dealt with the next session, the session after, the session after, the session after, or whenever. It's going to be dealt with because those poles are going to rot. That equipment is going to fail. It is going to have to be replaced. It's going to have to be worked on, and either we're going to have co-ops that help us, or we're going to have to contract out with whomever we can find that will work on equipment so old you can't find parts for, or we're going to contract out and get somebody else to replace it. But if we're going to have electricity to our parks and not do primitive camping, this is an issue that's on the radar. This is one potential solution. Fair enough? Fair enough. Anybody else? Agenda except for Senator Boswell.
Mr. Chairman, last month I asked some questions of the teacher's retirement system. Mr. Bo Barnes has addressed those questions that I had in your packet today. The question was how many people in the TRS system receive over $100,000 a year in retirement benefits. The answer was 758. The highest retiree receiving $246,000 a year. And from some of the information is in your packet. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And no other item on the agenda except for wanted to make sure everybody understood correspondence and things that we received and reports that have come in. Look through your agenda. If you've got any questions, please talk with staff. Otherwise, we are adjourned. Thank you all.